Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. First, want to start off and thank the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority and Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport for their partnership, and a special thank you to James Johnson for his assistance in putting on this event today. So let's get started. We're going over a couple of ground rules for everyone. We'll start off with remarks from Acting Administrator Billy Nolen, and then we will move to remarks from Sarah Nelson, who is the President of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, AFL-CIO. Then we'll have time for a few questions, and we are streaming this live on FAA's platforms. So, sir?
Well, thank you, and sorry for the feedback there. Good morning, everyone. It truly is a good morning because we are here to make an important change, one that is going to improve aviation safety, and that's been long overdue. Even better, we have some great partners in aviation safety with us. Sarah Nelson, the International President of the Association of Flight Attendants Communication Workers of America, and Julie Hedrick, President of the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, are here. And we have behind me, beautiful group, we have men and women who serve as flight attendants and critical crew members of every flight here. So thank you all for joining us this morning. Sorry for my... Earlier this morning, I signed the paperwork, and the ink may be drying still, that increases rest period for flight attendants to 10 consecutive hours, no exception. Sarah. It's been a long road, and it's about time. I can tell you it's been a priority for me and for this administration, and that's why we are here today. I'm a pilot, and as any pilot can tell you, we cannot fly the plane without the safety expertise and support of flight attendants. Flight attendants are trained to take action during emergencies, administer first aid, conduct evacuations, manage medical emergency. They know the location of every piece of equipment needed during an emergency: fire extinguishers, first aid kits, flotation devices, oxygen masks, and emergency slides. They also check the equipment before flight. I spent many years as a line captain and on both the MD-80 and the Boeing 757 and 767. I remember on one particular flight that I had a hydraulic issue. I briefed the flight attendants and we let the passengers know that we were returning to Dallas due to a mechanical issue. As always, the flight attendants did an incredible job of making sure the passengers were informed, but also making sure that they were safe and felt confident as we returned to the airport. During those years of flying the line, I remember many times being at maximum duty with minimal layover time. And flight attendants had even fewer rest hours than pilots. I worked alongside them, traveled with them, and I can tell you firsthand that well-rested crew members are important to safety. And as we've seen too often recently, they are in the front lines, or they are on the front lines, responding to unruly passengers who could threaten the safety of flight and other passengers. Like I said, they need just as much rest, because flight attendants are the foundation of aviation safety's culture, starting with cabin safety. Everyone knows about the landing of U.S. Airways 1549 on the Hudson River. There were actually two miracles on the Hudson that day. First was landing the plane. The second, but just as important, was the flight attendants who got the passengers off the plane and kept them safe throughout the entire event. The bottom line is that rest period increase for flight attendants corrects a historical inequity. And now I'm pleased to turn it over to Sarah Nelson for remarks. Sarah.
Acting Administrator Nolen, thank you so much. This feels really good. And you said it, we're one crew focused on safety. And in aviation, that means those of us on the front lines. It means working with regulators who are focused on safety. It means the coordination between flight attendants and the flight deck. This rule is a long time in the making. And representative of 100,000 flight attendants in the United States, standing behind me are activists who worked diligently to raise our voices, to move tens of thousands of flight attendants to action, to call on their legislators for this change. This started in the late 80s as flight attendants were identifying the problems with fatigue, the problems with not enough rest. That led to, at the time, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman Norm Mineta first proposing changes to duty and rest rules, including a 10-hour minimum rest. When that did not become law, we knew that we had to get the science to prove that this was a safety loophole, to prove that this was a safety risk in aviation. And we did get congressionally mandated fatigue studies with the help and leadership of Norm Mineta and many others in Congress. Those fatigue studies and health studies determined that not only was fatigue rampant among our ranks, but it also had other impacts on contributing to increased risk in health for flight attendants, increased risk in cancer, in cardiac issues, and in all kinds of respiratory issues, and the lack of rest was contributing to those health problems. The fatigue studies that we did were happening at the same time as the pilots. This was an issue of fatigue for all crews. When the Colgan crash happened, the pilot rest rules were changed, essentially overnight, on a continuing resolution to keep the government funded and keep the FAA moving. But overnight, flight attendants were essentially left on the cutting room floor, and we had to fight forward. Part of our efforts after that was to equalize rest with the pilots, and thank you so much for recognizing that issue of equality, Billy. We continue to make this one standard of safety and continue to press forward to ensure that this minimum rest is also applied for cargo pilots. But today, this is the result of efforts of grassroots action, strategic initiative, very clear planning from our union, but then action by people in each of their congressional districts. We had an overwhelming vote in 2018 to give clear instruction to the FAA, to the DOT, to change these rest rules. That overwhelming bipartisan vote that came on the heels of incredible championing by Chairman Peter DeFazio, by Chair Maria Cantwell in Commerce, Chair Rick Larson of the Aviation Subcommittee, Chair Frank Lobiondo, also of the Aviation Subcommittee, a real bipartisan effort supporting the advocacy of flight attendants and supporting the science that had determined that this was a safety risk and loophole that we had to close. That bipartisan vote was 92-6 in the Senate and 398-23 in the House. That did not happen, though. It was not implemented. It was clear instruction to the DOT to update the register within 30 days, and under the Trump administration, this was put on a regulatory path to kill this. It is only because President Biden was elected and listened to us and heard flight attendants that this was a key priority. He made a promise to us, to our union, that this would be a priority of the administration. And under his leadership and the leadership of Secretary Pete Buttigieg and the leadership of Acting Administrator Nolen, It is a reality today, and the airlines will have to implement this within 90 days. We are so happy this was time to happen, and especially on the heels of coronavirus and all that flight attendants have had to deal with longer nights, longer days, shorter nights, with the reduction in schedules throughout this pandemic, and also all of the combative passengers that they have had to face on not enough rest. Today, that is getting corrected, and we are going to see by the new year this implemented across the industry. Thank you so much. We are so proud to be here and so proud of the leadership from the FAA, from this administration. Grateful, and we will make it very clear about the hard work that it takes to call on our leaders to do the right thing, but then the leadership that is necessary and the consequences of elections that make a real difference for our safety and health everywhere. Thank you.
We've got time for a few questions, and I'm going to attempt to repeat the question for the people who are watching us on FAA's platforms. Yes, Alan Levin, Bloomberg. Alan asked a question about the status of the MAX 7 and the MAX 10 for Acting Administrator Nolen.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Let me just say, from the FAA's perspective, our focus is purely on safety. Any change to any deadline is within the purview of Congress, and it is up to them. We are focused on safety where we always will remain. Thank you.
David Shepardson with Reuters. David Shepardson asked why it took the amount of time it did for the rule to be final. For both of you.
Sure. Let me just say a couple, then I'll turn it over to Sarah. Look, I can't come in and you've already heard from Sarah on her thoughts there, and she'll have more. Let me just say, it did take too long. But I can assure you that when I came aboard, and as I've been in the acting administrator role, this has been one of my top priorities, as it's been of the secretary as well. And together, we've got this done. It took us way too long, but we are finally here. Sarah.
David, this really did have to be taken out of a process that was set to kill it. And so that was the first part of this. I have never seen OIRA turn a final rule around that quickly. I also have never seen airlines given an implementation period of just 90 days as opposed to 6 months or longer. Now, this is correct. The FAA is correct in doing this. We were able to show that where we negotiated this in contracts, it is possible to implement that quickly. And obviously, they have known for 5 years that this is something that they should be doing. So it did take too long, but what we saw as the Biden administration took over was really prioritizing this and getting this back into a process where we can move this quickly. And in the regulatory world, I've actually never seen things move this quickly. So we're pleased with that, and we're pleased this got turned around, put on the right path, and finally made a reality.
Okay. Micah with the Wall Street Journal. Micah asked what kind of documentation the agency is looking for the MAX 7 and 10 for Acting Administrator Nolen.
Thanks, Micah, for the good question. Without getting too technical here, part of what was called out for the Act was for Boeing to deliver a series of what's called system safety analyses. And there are about 35 of those packages that are due to us. They're in the process of delivering those. Some of those are pretty exhaustive, but let me just say that, look, When we've got all the information we need, and not until then, we'll certificate the airplane. So we are working through it very purposefully, and when we get there, we get there.
I think we got time for one more. Yes. Question from, I'm sorry, tell me your name. Question about how to handle disgruntled passengers moving forward. Question for both of you.
Thank you for the question. Look, we have a zero tolerance policy. We've seen a dramatic, certainly with the mask mandate that has gone away, we've seen a dramatic decline. But we still have a zero tolerance policy. So whether or not it is mask or any other time, if people act up on an airplane and act out of character, we're going to put them on notice and we're going to take action. Our role within the FAA is to protect crews. That is first and foremost for us. We will do everything within our statutory power to ensure that people who do wrong things have consequences for those actions. Sarah.
Look, the incidents are still too high, and you called out the clear problem of all full airplanes and minimum staff. Number one, this rest rule, the airlines have said that they will have to hire more flight attendants. That doesn't necessarily mean more staffing, but of course it means people are not going to be as exhausted as they're dealing with this. That is helpful. It's also been very helpful. I want to be very clear that the FAA has taken a leadership role on this issue. It was very important that on January 13th of 2021, they set out that zero tolerance policy and have been very clear about rolling out fines, have worked with us to coordinate with law enforcement, airlines, airports, to move communication to help everyone understand that this is a responsibility across the board. That communication and jurisdiction issues to be able to respond to these issues so there are consequences on the other end are very important. The MOU between TSA and FAA to take people out of the pre-check program because they are no longer trusted if they are acting like this on a plane is very important. The MOU with the DOJ so that FAA can move its investigations over to DOJ and speed up prosecution and get people to those jail sentencings faster because of that is very important. These consequences are very important. We need to continue to act together, call this out, and make sure that flight attendants are getting the backing that they need. Our union would also say that we want lawmakers to move on a banned passenger list. It is possible to do that with a due process. So we continue to promote that. We also continue to call on the airlines to increase staffing both at the gates and on the planes. And we also call on everyone in any leadership position anywhere to call out helpers and to lift up helpers and to recognize that actually this is a small handful of people making it hell for flight attendants on the front lines of their work and making it very difficult for travelers who just want to have a safe, uneventful flight, which is the vast majority of people. So we continue to tell people how to be helpers, to lift up that spirit, and to work together with the spirit of solidarity on our planes. That's what makes aviation fly.
Pete Muntean, CNN. And for the people who are viewing, the question was, what's the message for the flying public going to the holidays? Sir?
Well, thank you very much for the question. If you look at the data, it is abundantly clear that the majority of delays rest with the airlines. We are doing everything within our power from both a collaborative process as we look across the NAS. We have plans and controls in place as we think about the holiday season. But overall, we feel good about that. My message to the flying public is that we want to ensure that they've got a good experience, and we've called upon the airlines to make sure they've done their parts. We will certainly continue to do ours, and together we will make this holiday as uneventful as we can make it for the flying public. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks to everyone for coming, and thanks to everyone for tuning in on our platforms and watching today. Thank you very much.